Viren has asked me to talk about brand building. I think a time when everyone is cutting down on costs, this is the last thing you want to talk about or hear about. And yet it's the first thing we all need to do if we really want to do all the things that have been talked about today, namely get into export business, get into international business, and do a lot of innovation in diversifying into digital printing and so on. So we will structure the session today very quickly for 15 minutes or maximum 20, covering brand anatomy. What is a brand? The essence, the impact, and the benefits of having a good brand. We'll touch upon the brand builders, the things that go into the process of brand building, the 4 Ps, the 3 Is, and we will touch upon Jack Trout's marketing principles. We will learn about the tricks of the trade from the celebrity brands who have agreed to share what they have done to build their brand. So that's the overall structure. Their philosophies will be presented by IPP, Comart. These are all brands that you can recognize very easily. The last one is obviously the guy who put his fingerprint on the golden elephant and wouldn't let it go. What is a brand? It's nothing but image, feelings, and association. That's what a brand is all about. The essence is, when you ask someone to think of your company, how do they see your company? What is the image that they have in their mind? Might be interesting to ask them to visualize an animal or a car that represents the characteristics that they think your company has. If they say an elephant, you know they're thinking of your company as huge, big, strong, but very slow, very lethargic. If they think of the company as a tiger, then you know that it's fast, aggressive, and predatory. If they think of you as a mix between tiger and elephant, then you have something there. So feelings follow images in the mind, and feelings is not about just how they feel about your company, but how your company makes them feel about themselves. I think that's a very important thing, and the perception that they have about the company is the reality in their minds. So it's important that feelings and perceptions are also managed appropriately. And finally, the association. Have they had good experiences, bad experiences? What comes to their mind? These are the issues that are summarized very well by Tom Asaker, and I'll just read through this 2 paragraphs which I found very interesting. Far too many companies are focused on the product and not the experience. We need to replace our brain with our heart, because that's often how people make decisions. Studies have proven that the essential difference between emotion and reason is that emotion leads to action and reason leads to conclusions. Isn't that interesting? What do you want? Do you want action, or do you want people to think? The question you need to ask, how am I making my customers feel? Am I making them compare, or am I making them care? There is a big difference. Caring and feelings drive action. The other stuff is just a tool. The bottom line is that the really hard stuff is the soft stuff. It's the feelings of your customers and your employees. That, in the end, is your competitive advantage. So everything else obviously builds that up, but ultimately the final, the end mile journey is about creating the right perceptions, feelings, and experiences. If you do succeed in doing that and have a superior brand image, what does it result in? It results in customer loyalty, employee loyalty, and investor goodwill. Clearly, that gives you a competitive advantage, because customer loyalty leads you to be able to charge premium pricing for the same product, or you could have a greater market share at the same price as your competitor, because you would be the preferred supplier. Employee loyalty leads to higher productivity because a happy employee is the one that we need in our printing plant. And of course, lower attrition rate, which is a serious issue today in the industry. Goodwill of investors, clearly necessary. They will always invest in a good brand. They will always pay premium for brands that are well known, well accepted. So if you go for mergers and acquisitions, you go for some kind of joint venture, valuation of your company has to be done. This brand image is very handy at that time. And with your bankers, perhaps you can negotiate a lower interest rate. IPO also is very helpful. Maybe some of the panelists can share their experiences on what they did with their brand before going in for IPO. Higher brand value. What does higher brand value or equity actually mean? It's a very intangible thing and it's often misunderstood. So here is a simple definition. It's an accumulated brand goodwill in the market, and in essence it's the difference between the book value of your company and the stock market value of your company if you are a listed company. And the difference between the two can be explained as the brand value of your company. That's because the expectations of the investors from your company are high, the brand equity is high, it's intangible. And the intangible net worth, they say, could be as much as 1/3 of the total market cap of the company. Coke and Microsoft brands, in 2001, they were valued at $134 billion, the intangible value. Coke, IBM, Nokia, Disney, McDonald's, Mercedes-Benz, the brand value is 45% of each company's market cap. So what they've invested in building those brands is yielding them great benefit in the marketplace. How do we go about doing brand building? Let's first clarify some of the misconceptions that are there. I'm sure none of you have these misconceptions, but I'm just going to share this so that you can share it with your friends. Brand building is needed for products, not for services. You know that's not true. Services need brand building even more because when somebody buys a product, he can test it. After he buys the product, if it doesn't work well, he can return it. Printing, if somebody comes and gives you a print job, it has to be based on trust. It has to be based on his past experience. It has to be based on what he believes he will get out of your press. And of course, he can get the job reprinted, but he may have missed the deadline by then. So for services, it's much more important. The same thing applies to catering, retailing, you name it. Another misconception is brand building essentially means selecting a good name for the company or the product and having a well-designed stationery, corporate identity program, which is again not true. It's, in fact, brand building encompasses management philosophy, manufacturing excellence, marketing and advertising strategies, the whole ballgame. Another misconception is that if our quality is good, our brand will end up being good. Of course, you cannot have a good brand without good quality, but it's not true that if you have good quality, you will have a good brand. A lot of investment is necessary to build a good brand, and we'll talk about how one can go about doing that. 4 P's and 3 I's are the key ingredients for brand building: positioning, performance, promotion, and people. Positioning includes repositioning, because the company cannot stick to the same position throughout its lifespan. We've seen the brand leaders change their position many times. So these are the key ingredients which are visible. Also what's visible is the infrastructure. One of the 3 I's, the fundamentals, are infrastructure that you have, the technology that you employ, how innovative the company is, and that is something which is born out of the innovativeness, the processes that you have inside the company. It may not be very visible to the outside market. And finally, the integrity, which obviously is the foundation. So if you have 4 P's and 3 I's, there is a good chance you'll have a good brand. What do you need to position yourself properly? Target customer segments and not product segments is what they say. identify which customers are you best able to cater to based on the competencies that you have, and what are their unfulfilled needs that you can cater to. If you can tap into that, then you know that that's the position that will work best for you. And most importantly, create a differentiation. Stand out in a crowd, be remembered. There are so many brands in the marketplace. It's an overcrowded market, and they say typically a customer cannot recall more than 5 to 7 brands at a time. And I think the same thing applies to printing plants, especially if you're going out into newer markets or into new product segments. Positioning also can be defined in terms of whether you're pushing a commodity brand or whether you're a cost leader in the marketplace and positioning yourself therefore as a value brand, or you're a quality leader in the market, therefore you have a premium brand, or is it that your company's brand is based on your own personality? Now these are all human brands because they have led their companies, they are very visible in the marketplace, and people think of IPP as Amilaji and so on. Now this is a very good thing. That's the brand which is the top of the pyramid because it's something that cannot perish overnight. It will be durable for the company. But the fact remains that the company is very vulnerable should the owner decide to divest or withdraw from business for any reason. So that needs to be managed properly. Differentiation is highest at the topmost level and the least at the commodity level. Repositioning one needs to do in order to respond to the changing needs of the marketplace. The trends change, customer requirements change, one has to reposition the company. One may start as a packaging printer and move on to offering other services. As we heard today, you can be an offset printer and put on digital printing side by side and reposition your offering. It could be that the life cycle of your product has come to an end. We are talking about newspapers. I heard this morning that newspapers are reaching an end of life cycle in the US. Obviously, they reposition themselves as supplier of information using multimedia approaches. So that's repositioning. And whether the company has, or the product has lost its differentiation. If it's become one of the crowd, it's time to reposition. One can't do without performance. Quality must be consistent with the brand positioning. What you promise is what you must deliver. And what you deliver is only what you should promise. That consistency is very necessary. Many times there is a lot of hype around a company, and then there is disappointment if the performance is below the hype. Sometimes the performance far exceeds the hype, in which case the company is missing the opportunity to build a strong brand. Focus on the non-negotiable needs of the customers when you're focusing on performance. There are certain needs which the customer will, if not fulfilled, remember for a lifetime and blacklist you. For example, a carton which opens up at the flap obviously is non-functional. But there are many needs which the customer can compromise on. An annual report delivered after the deadline he will remember forever. But maybe a little bit of quality variance in the annual report he may forgive you. So it's important to have a checklist of what is non-negotiable for every job and make sure that one doesn't fail on that. And clearly higher quality brands have higher margins and market share and profitability. So it's better to be at the top of the pyramid than at the bottom. Promotion. Establish the image of a first mover. There will be more about first mover later on. There is something about being first. You can't be first as a company, be first in a category, and we'll talk about that. Internal promotion is very important. I think it's necessary for all employees to understand the philosophy of the company, the brand philosophy of the company, and it's especially important for service industries because in service industries, people interface with customers all the time. And if they are in tune with your brand philosophy, their job is a lot easier. If they are not, they can cause a lot of damage. And of course, it's necessary to actually invest money in brand building rather than just letting it happen over a period of time, especially when you're talking about export markets. What are the communication components? All of you know that better than most. Visual identity, verbal identity, and of course, a mix of visual, verbal, and audio. That leads to a strong brand image. People, finally, are the brand ambassadors. The people you hire are your greatest differentiators, especially in our industry. And the way we treat our people, they say, is the way they will treat the customers. So it's very, very important that our culture in treating them is the culture we want in their treating the customers, and that's what we try and inculcate. And most importantly, once again, salespeople must not sell. In our industry, they should be solutions provided. They should be consultants. They should solve problems of customers. So we've covered the basics of brand building. We will go through top 10 of Jack Trout's. You've heard this guy's name anyway. He's a famous marketing guru. His laws, his many laws, but I picked the top 10. I'll just read through them. He believes very clearly that either you succeed in differentiating yourself or you die as a company. So it's differentiate or die. And all of his laws are around this basic philosophy. Law of leadership. It's better to be first than it is to be better. It's better to be first than it is to be better. So even if you're better, if you're not first, you've lost out. The law of the category. If you can't be first in a category, set up a new category you can be first in. Create something new. Create a new kind of offering and say, I'm first in that. The law of the mind. It is better to be first in the mind than to be first in the marketplace. So many times there is a lot of hype even before the product enters the market. And that wins the battle, 50% of the battle. The law of perception. Marketing is not a battle of products. It's a battle of perceptions, because for customers, perception is the reality. The law of focus. The most powerful concept in marketing is owning a word in prospects' minds. Words like, Nike, you can, or McDonald's, I'm loving it, right? Something like that. The law of exclusivity. There is room only for 2 companies in every segment at the top. The third company, they say, has to find a niche, or as the Americans call it, a niche, or go into a ditch. So that's what they say about positioning. You have to be at the top. The law of the ladder. The strategy you use depends on which rung you occupy on the ladder. Got to give your messages based on where you are. The law of sacrifice. You have to give up something in order to get something. Sadly true. The law of unpredictability. Unless you write your competitors' plans, you can't predict the future. How many of us can really write what the competitor is going to do? If you can, then you know how to beat him. The law of success. I love this the most. Success often leads to arrogance, and arrogance to failure. And what we have here are the most modest people in the industry, and that's why they are so successful. Or shall we say they are successful and yet they are modest. And tell us a little bit about that also. Before I end, I just want you to share with you Dilbert's philosophy. Those of you who know Dilbert, you know how subtle he can be. His boss and he were talking about brand building. The boss said, I don't need to know the details. Just give me the high altitude view, the 50,000 feet view. Dilbert says, from a high altitude, we are all a bunch of termites trying to eat the same log. He says, maybe I'll drill down a little more, the boss says. He says, the termites hate each other. So we'll ask the big termites what they think of the log and what they think of other termites and what you've done to hog a big pie of the log, a big piece of the log. Thank you very much.